You're here. Welcome to the Masterminding Success podcast. They say if you want to be successful in business and in life, then surround yourself with successful people. So pull up a seat. The mastermind is about to begin.
Hey, glad you could join us for another episode of the Masterminding Success podcast. We're your hosts, Keith Wheeler
and Nuria Corby.
And what are we talking about today, Nuria?
Today we're going to talk about KDP strategies that actually work. So there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah. And this seems to be a topic that a lot of people are interested in, because I get questions like this all the time. And when we say that actually work, we're talking about actually get you sales. Obviously, as a disclaimer, we can't make any promises because everybody's book is different, and we can't, obviously, without even looking at your book, can't guarantee anything. But these are strategies that we've both seen, either we've done ourselves or we've seen other people do that work and have worked consistently. Not just I saw it one time and they did it fine, and that, I'm not going to consider those, because there are so many different ways to do things, and that's one thing I love about this industry is there's no one size fits all. There's no there's no right way. This is the only way to do it. Everything's unique to your own business and your own books, but there are definitely things that we've seen consistently working that we can share.
Absolutely. And when I thought about the topic, I thought, is there a number one strategy or a number two strategy? What is the main strategy? And I actually think there isn't a main one, or I think they're all equally important depending on your books and depending on what niche you're in. Right. There are so many different variables that come into it. So there isn't one strategy that will work for everybody. But there are some strategies that do work and that I feel you should implement to really maximize your potential for sales, if I put it that way. The one that came into my head straight away when you said about the topic, I thought creating a series or creating more than one book. I think that is one strategy that is so important, because first of all, the more books we create, the better we get at them. But also from the perspective of a customer, if we are creating books that people really like, the more books we create, the more they will consume. Because, and I think your niche, the puzzle book niche, is a really good example for that. Because if you're creating one puzzle book and people buy it, that's great. But then you wouldn't stop, because you would want to give them more choices and create another one and another one and another one. And certain book types are really ideal for that kind of thing, and puzzle books being one of them. Fiction would be another one. If you have a series, with the same character or the same setting or whatever it is your series is based on, I think that is a really good strategy to get more sales. And that works for fiction, non-fiction, and low content books.
Exactly.
Would you agree with that? Because
if there was one that I would say is the most important, and like you said, I truly believe that most of these are ones that they're all equally important, and what their priority is and importance for your business is going to differ depending on what type of books you create. But that said, if there is one that I think is the most important, it is to not even necessarily create a series, but create more books.
More books.
In that niche. So create more books for that audience. So they have, like you said, you get, if you only have one book, you get so many customers that are going to buy it, but they come back and you don't have anything else, they're just going to move on to the next person. And so that's like a missed opportunity. So absolutely, just creating your next book, and understand that regardless of what type of book you create, as long as it's in the same niche, it doesn't have to be exactly the same. So like using your example of, a fiction series, you can also create, short reads, little prequels or whatever, just something else to satiate them while you're working on your next big book or whatever. So, staying within the same niche is, I think, especially with using the same pen name, I think is important, because before you move on to the next one, you want to make sure that you're getting results in this one. Unless it's something you just jumped into, you gave it a shot, it didn't really work, move on to something else. I understand that. But regardless of your niche, like you said, creating multiple books in that niche, because not only, like we said, it helps them get, can buy something else from you, but also the more books you have, the more quality books you have in the same niche, it shows your authority in that niche. Again, fiction, nonfiction, puzzle books, doesn't matter, or any other kind of low content, no content books. The more you have, assuming they're good quality, the more you'll be recognized for that, and you become the guru or whatever, well known. For example, Stephen King. He's written other books besides horror, but if you're into horror books and you're into Stephen King horror, then there's plenty of books for you to choose from. And so that's how you go from a customer to a repeat customer.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting because we're talking, we're talking quantity here, and we always say quality before quantity. It kind of feels counterintuitive to say, no, you have to make more books, because we keep telling people not to have that attitude and not to make masses of books, to make quality books. But obviously quantity does come into it for the very reasons we were talking about. But it also, what it shows you is that it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. Exactly. Because it's not so much just creating quantity, it's finding out what kind of books should I create in quantity.
Right. What do they want?
Yeah. And when we first start, when I first started, what do people start with? I started with a budget book for children or something like that. But normally I say to people, start with a notebook just to learn how to upload and everything.
Yeah.
But I remember people starting with thousands of notebooks, just uploading lots of notebooks. And you don't know if notebooks are going to be your thing if you do that. You should just upload one. Upload a notebook, see how that goes. Upload a planner, see how that goes. Upload a journal, see how that goes. And then once you've published a variety of books, which ones are the ones that are selling well for you? Which ones are the ones that you enjoy creating the most? And all of that process takes a long time, because it's over months rather than weeks where you find out what your thing is. I still sell a lot of notebooks, but I wouldn't say that notebooks are my thing. I have other books that sell better. It's just that notebooks are so easy to create.
They are.
But, I wouldn't want to create a whole business on that in my case. But for somebody else, notebooks might be the thing to do, or they might really sell a lot of planners. Whatever your thing is, it takes time to find out what your thing is.
Right.
And to have a strategy where you just publish hundreds of notebooks or hundreds of planners is not the right strategy. I think it's better to start with a variety of books and then seeing which ones resonate most with your audience. Because you'll have different audiences as well. The people that buy planners are not the people that buy, coloring books, for example. It's all different. So I think it's very interesting because, when I think back on the strategies that worked for me, I think that was one of the things that guided me. I was looking at which books am I actually selling, and then you double down on those rather than trying the ones that are not selling. I kind of tend to leave them behind.
Yeah, there's no sense in reinventing the wheel. If you find something that works, double down on it. But yeah, I agree that one of the best strategies you can do is have multiple books in that niche, whether it's a series or not. Again, and that's kind of what you were saying, how we tell people don't put out a whole bunch of stuff, but that's why I've intentionally said good quality. Add that in there. So yes, it is still a numbers game. It's you need to get, especially if you're just starting out or you're just starting out in a niche, you need to get that authority. You need to get that interest in you, and you need to get your book more visibility. And so if you have 3 books, you're 3 times more lucky or have 3 times more chance of one of your books being seen than if you only have one.
Absolutely. And I always remember something that you said. You said your first book isn't going to be your best. So
Right.
it shows that you have to,
Yeah.
you have to create quite a few books to just get better at it, to
Yeah.
improve and to,
Yeah.
it's like learning any skill, the more you practice, the better you get.
Exactly. It's just yeah, same. Every aspect of it is you're continuously getting better, and
Yeah.
that should be the goal. That should be the goal. Which leads me into another way that you can help get more sales, and with a KDP, with this KDP strategy is checking out the reviews of other books in your niche. I know we talk about that all the time, but that's because it's important,
Yeah.
and it's better to learn from mistakes other people's have made than learning from your own mistakes. So taking the time when you first start out, when you're deciding on a niche, looking at the reviews. And then I also will look before I upload it just I'll look and see if there's any newer reviews that maybe, somebody just put this in there and it wasn't something that was I saw in any of the other reviews, whether it's a negative or whatever, and I can double check my book to make sure it doesn't have that. Or if it's a positive that another book has, make sure that my book has that as well. And a great way to do that is look at the new release category in the category that you're going to put your book in. So those are showing you the books that are selling now, that just released in the last 30 days. And so that ones that have reviews there are most likely going to be even newer reviews than books that have been around for a while.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's one of the things that helps me a lot with my books. Looking at reviews is an eye opener. You
It
can
is.
sometimes find things that you wouldn't have thought of, and someone mentions it in a review in one of your competitors' books, and you think, I didn't think of that. And that's happened so many times to me where I've learned something and I've been able to incorporate that in my new book. So that's a really good point.
Mhm.
And and it's something we've mentioned before, and I think some of the things we're going to mention today we have mentioned before, and I'm going to say another one again because I'm always about this particular point, and it's A plus
A
content.
plus content. I knew where you
Yeah,
were going.
you knew I was going to say that. And the reason I mention A plus content is because you have to look at your KDP strategy as a whole,
Hmm.
as it's different parts. It's like a machine, and different parts have to work in conjunction. Otherwise, the whole machine doesn't work.
Right.
And A plus content is a part of that machine. It's just
Hmm.
one little cog in the whole thing that works, but it's an important cog because I've mentioned this before in a previous episode. It's like the display. It's your shop display of your
Yep.
book. And that's so important. So I think one strategy is to have all your things set up the way they should be. And part of that setup is A plus content and having good titles, having good subtitles. And I know when we talk about strategy, a lot of people will probably say, well, to me, that means finding right keywords and doing your research. How do you research? What strategy do you use when you're researching a book? All of that is really part of the same thing.
Right.
It's how you present your book and researching if the demand is there, all of those things. And I don't know about you, but I find that people overcomplicate it sometimes. Do you
Yeah,
think that's the case?
I do. I really do. and
Yeah.
and they either overcomplicate it with what they do, or they overcomplicate it in their head so they don't even try. And
Yes.
it's not keeping in mind, going back to what we said with the first one, which is, have more than one book. So with that mentality, goes back to something I've been saying for years, which is done is better than perfect. A good, obviously you still want a good book, good cover, good content, but you know, instead of spending so much time worrying about all the little nuances, it's it's more important to focus on what's actually going to move the needle and make you money, and that is creating a book. I mean, two books has a better chance of creating money for you than one book. And A plus content. Actually, it's funny you mentioned that because the video that's coming out on my channel this week are top 10 reasons why your book might not be selling. And one of the things I specifically talk about at the end is A plus content, because A plus content, when it first came out, was one of those things where if you added it to your book stood out. It looked different than everybody else, and it drew people in. So it was a great addition to your book. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on you want to look at it, the A plus has been around enough that it's now mainstream to the point where instead of it being an added bonus if you had it in there, if you don't have it in there, it makes your book look incomplete.
Yeah.
And so it goes from, hey, this is a great thing, a great strategy that you can do to really make your book stand out. And now, like I said, it's almost a necessity. It is a necessity for all my books. Like I absolutely have to have A plus content because again, it doesn't look finished otherwise. And
Yeah.
especially when people are looking on their phones, that's one of the first things they see is from the publisher. And so if they just see your book description and then scroll down and that's where the reviews are, there's so much missed opportunities and missed space right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I notice that specifically when I go into other Facebook groups, KDP groups, and I know we don't allow sort of advertising our books in our groups, but there are lots of groups where they still do that. They
Right.
put their book up and say, "This is my new book, please buy it," And I click on them sometimes because I think I want to find out what people are making.
Right.
And the amount of times where it's got no A plus
No plus.
content
Yeah.
and they're advertising their book. They're showing people their book. They've just created a book, they're proud of it, and they're saying, "Have a look at my book." And you go on it and there's hardly anything there. There's no A plus content. The titles aren't great. And I can always tell by the people that have a really good A plus content set up and that have their titles done correctly and their subtitles done correctly, you can almost feel the quality in that
Right.
listing. Whereas the ones that don't have A plus content, they very often they also don't have correct titles or subtitles. And it looks like it was a rush job and they just wanted to get that book out and it's been rushed. And you can't rush these things. I would say that it's part of your strategy not to rush and
Right.
to really take your time and not only create your book very carefully, but also create the whole structure carefully, the title, the subtitle, the keywords. And when I say keywords, this is the other thing I find. When I research, I don't really look at keywords so much. I mean, they are important. I'm not saying they're not important. But I really look at other things far more carefully. Like, first of all, the main thing is there demand? So you really want to see some books in your niche that are selling. And that is, I would say, my first strategy is, first of all, if I'm going to create a book, is that book even selling? Is there a niche that has demand? And if I see several books that have a BSR of under 100,000, I mean, some people say 80,000. I would say if they're under 100,000,
Right.
that's okay for me. I'd still make a book.
Right.
And that's the main thing I look at, is there demand? Because the rest can be manipulated in a way.
Right.
If there is demand, you can create a really good offer. You can be competitive. If there's no demand, there's not really anything you can do.
Right. No,
You can't
agreed.
create demand,
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's a perfect point is that, when you don't want to run ads if it's popular, if they have good BSRs, you can run ads to promote your book and make it more visible. But I've seen people run ads to books where there's no interest in that niche at all.
Yeah,
so
and I
you're
bet
just
they're cheap
literally-
ads as well.
they're cheap. Yeah, they're cheap ads, but you're wondering why you're not getting any sales. Well, it could be you're just in the wrong niche or sub niche. Maybe you've drilled it down too specific and there's just a certain number of people that are interested in that instead of, going a little bit broader and reaching, a broader audience. Another strategy, and this is kind of similar, is making sure that the keywords you use are relevant to your book. Amazon's algorithm, the number one deciding factor on what shows up at the top is relevancy. And what makes a book relevant is when someone sees it, they click on it. When they click on it, they buy it. When they buy it, they leave a review. I mean, that's the best case scenario. So if you are putting keywords in there that aren't relevant to your book, then you're confusing the algorithm, and you might show up, at the top of page one because when you first launch it. But as soon as the algorithm sees that, oh, it's number one on the first page, no one's clicking on it, it must not really be relevant. And so it's a great way to kind of set yourself up for failure to begin with.
Yeah.
Make sure that the keyword phrases that you're using are relevant to your book.
Yeah, so important. That is something that I learned in time as well, because I remember when I first started, I was thinking of every keyword under the sun that I could think of and put that in the 7 back-end keyword slots, even if they weren't really that relevant. Things like gift for mom, gift for dad, gift for grandpa.
Yep.
And I still remember doing that. And really, it's nowadays that would be totally wrong to do, because I end up using a lot less keywords now than I did when I first started, because they're far more targeted. And I'm trying to think of an example, because there's some things that people would type in. Oh, I know an example. I saw a book the other day where someone had published a recipe book, but it wasn't a recipe book, it was a notebook. But it said recipe book, notebook for writing down your recipes, something like that.
Okay.
And I think that is a confusing customer experience, because if you type in recipe book, that book might come up because it's got recipe book in the title. It's got those keywords, but it's not actually a recipe book. It's not teaching you any recipes. It's just a notebook where you can type in your own recipes. So I think things like that can be confusing, where you're using keywords and they come up with a book that's not relevant for people. So that is why it's so important to have keywords that are relevant. I don't know what this person could have done with this recipe book instead. I think I would have just called it a notebook, and you can write anything you want in there,
I would probably just as simple as just changing the title. Obviously you can't change the title, but like going in, I would have titled it, I would have put one extra word in there, blank recipe book. And that's
exactly,
that's really all you need. And because there are people that are interested in, a blank recipe book that they can just fill in with their family recipes. So there's absolutely probably I would say there's a niche, and an interest demand for it, but you want to make sure that you're labeling it appropriately. And again, it seems like I'm saying what things not to do, but I guess that still answers the question. KDP strategies at work, do the opposite of this.
Yeah.
So one is, like you said, having, you don't want to keyword stuff the title. But I see people creating titles they're creating the title for the algorithm, not for the consumer. And that's when they're keyword stuffing it and everything else. And you want the 7 keyword slots, your book description, all that other stuff. You can use that to put in relevant keywords. But with your title, it needs to be something that the browsing customer, the actual user, is going to connect with. And so if, something like blank recipe book, that's still good, because that's what they want. But if you start throwing in other words in there, for chefs and moms, and you know what I mean? And I've seen it. I've seen titles like that. And then it just looks odd and the people don't buy it. So absolutely, I would say a great strategy to do, not just on KDP, but just in general, is making sure that you create your titles designed for the actual consumer, not for the algorithm.
Absolutely. That is a really good point. And that's almost true for a lot of platforms. I mean, it's something that YouTubers do now. It's something that I'm sure other platforms like Etsy and eBay and whatever do as well, because algorithms are all very well and good, but at the end of the day, it's the consumer that makes the decision. And the algorithm is the only job it has is really to put that item or that product in front of the consumer.
Right.
And then ultimately the consumer will decide. And if the consumer sees a title for a book that's confusing, or, you wouldn't call Harry Potter for children. You don't call the book that. It's called
Right.
Harry Potter and whatever the subtitle is. But putting all irrelevant words in the title, and it's not that they're irrelevant to say who they're for, but it's not a title. It's not what goes in the title.
Right.
So yeah, that's something that I still see a lot as well. And it's always good to create, like you said, make the titles for the consumer, not the algorithm. That's a very, very good point. Yeah.
And another thing is when it comes to running ads, ads can absolutely, help your book get more visibility and help you get more sales. But you need to make sure that your book is ready for it, is ready to run ads to it. Is your cover dialed in? Are you in the right categories? The main thing for me is, does your book description sell your book?
Yeah.
Because so many people are using the book description like it's the back of the book blurb, and that's not what it is. It's your Amazon sales page. It's the last chance you have to convince that browsing customer to click buy now. And so with the book description, its job is to either get them to read the next line, or ideally get them to click buy now. That's it. That's all it does. And so a great strategy is to make sure that your book description does that you have, a good hook at the top in, header font, black, bold, and then you've got nothing unnecessary in the actual body of it. Just things that you want the customer to, when they're reading, be like, yeah. You just want the visual nods,
Yeah.
and then at the end, another header size, bold, call to action, very simple. And it tells them to click buy now today. Those two things, you can add anything else you want in front of it, join the adventure, if it's a, venture book, whatever, and click buy now today. Those are the most, and I always underline today, because you don't want them to put it in the cart, because then they're going to forget about it.
Yeah.
You want them to click buy now.
That's very true. Just something you just said about the blurb being different. I have in the past used, depending on the book and how it's worded, I have used the description as a blurb, maybe by changing a few things. But this just reminded me of a book I saw the other day where it was actually on the blurb and it said, buy this book buy this book now. And by the time you're reading the blurb, you've already bought the book. So there's
Right.
no point in having that at the back of it. So that's the difference, basically. But yeah, absolutely right. The description is really important. That's selling your book as well. So, and like you said, to advertise your book, you have to have all those things ready. Your book has to be ready to be advertised, and that includes the description, the A+ content, and all the rest of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what's another KDP strategy that you think works, that you've seen work?
I think, let me think. It's because we think of, we talked about this earlier, and strategies could be to do with marketing or promoting. And you made a really good point earlier when we were talking, because we tend to think about marketing and promotion as the same sort of thing. And you said they're different. And I thought you made a really good point.
Yeah. They're used interchangeably, but at the end of the day, they're really two different things. They're similar, but marketing is basically how you present your book. Whether it's, your branding of it, all of that. The promotion is you talking about your book, sharing your book. So what you do to take what you've created and try to get sales with it. So promoting it would be like running ads, going on, doing podcast interviews, things like that, putting it in, the subject line, or not the subject line, the email signature of your emails, things like that. That's all promoting it. Marketing is how it visually appears, like what you've done to it to draw attention to it. So like your book cover and things like that. So that's all the marketing. And then the, promoting it is sharing it with the world and telling people to buy it.
Yeah, that is such a good point, because we kind of tend to think, or I used to think of both being more or less the same, but actually, no, they're not the same. They're very different. And I guess some of the things that we mentioned earlier, like the A+ content, the titles, that's marketing.
Yes.
Whereas promoting is, and I got that idea from you a while back, in-person selling, where you can actually sell in markets, in school fairs, that was such an eye-opener for me when you mentioned that, because I've done those things, but not for books. I've done those things for my other business with the jewelry. So it made perfect sense when you said, well, you can do that with books as well. And that to me is promoting. So it's not, it kind of falls into marketing as well, but that's more what we now class as promoting rather than marketing. And there are lots of strategies that you could use to promote your books as well as marketing strategies. But that was one that I remember vividly, because it was like one of those aha moments that I hadn't thought about before, and you came up with that strategy, and I thought, yeah, that's a really good thing to do, and we should be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, and you don't just have to do it around the holidays. Doing it in person sales to me, I've sold everything from my children's books at craft fairs and things like that, especially around the holidays. But even like my sports themed book, my young adult novel, some of my sports themed journals, and I've got one softball. It's a journal that it's kind of like a diary for the players, and those I've sold literally at softball tournaments. I talked to the whoever's running the tournament, and I'm like, I've got these books. Would you be interested in having me sell them at a table? Pop up a table, and they'll usually charge you a certain amount. But I think the ones locally that I've done have been like $50, so it's not super expensive. And that I've done a lot of direct sales that way in person, because then they can see you as a person, like someone that they've talked to, as opposed to just a brand on Amazon. Mm-hmm. And so and regardless of whether your book's in KDP or any of that other stuff, which again, KDP Select is just for the ebook, but you can sell any of your books in person as well, whether it's to a local bookstore. You can do author talks at the local library, again, schools if you're doing children's books, things like that. And it's a great strategy because you're interacting with not just your community, but you're interacting with the readers of your book or the users of your book, and that will definitely resonate more with them, and they'll remember you as a creator more than if they just bought your book on Amazon.
Yeah. And I tell you one thing, now I'm thinking about it, it's so much easier to sell books in a school than it was to sell jewelry in a school. So absolutely. I think, and we're kind of, when, I don't know about in the US or in other countries, but here in the UK, when you go to school fairs and things like that, there's little stalls of usually mums selling something they've made themselves. I started making my own jewelry as well, but I then evolved to, sourcing the jewelry, ready-made jewelry. Right. But I used to sell them in schools, and it was a really good place to sell them. Now I'm thinking of it, how much better would it be to have sold books, children's books, mm-hmm. low content books would be perfect for something like that, because the buyers are mums more than dads, exactly. I think, in a school. Right. Yeah. And they're the type of people that would love journals, they would love planners, they would love children's books. So it's an amazing opportunity to do it. And not just in schools, because I used to sell in Christmas markets as well. Mm-hmm. Where else did I sell? Oh, wedding fairs. Wedding fairs were a bbig thing. You could create wedding planners and sell them at wedding fairs. Or if you're writing romance novels, why not? You could sell them. So there is such a big scope in in-person selling. which we don't really do enough, or we don't talk about it enough, I find. I don't know, I don't anyway. I haven't really been in that kind of world, but you must have seen that more often than me, being sort of more in the fiction and non-fiction side of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. We have a holiday fair in town, um, in December, and I'm always have a booth there. And, but not just, this town, but then next town over, they have some that, they always have one usually the following weekend. So I'll go there and sell my books there. But again, just like I said, even at schools or whatever, and especially, people tend to think just around the holidays, but no, because especially when it's getting close to the end of the school year, which in a lot of places here in the States, the end of the school year is in May. So that's right around the corner. You know, Parents want to buy books for their kids to keep them occupied over the summer.
Yeah.
And so whether it's puzzle books or journals or picture books or whatever, there's so much possibility. And
Activity books.
yeah, and again,
Yeah.
it gets you out there and interacting with your community. Now, I know not everybody, a lot of writers are introverted, and I get that. Believe it or not, I am too. But um, one, I mean, you don't have to do direct sales, but I would suggest everybody at least try it. I know one of the fears that people have is I don't want to have, 1,000 books sitting in my garage, but you don't have to. Like when I do it, especially if I'm doing it for the first time, like at a new location, I'll usually only have about 10 to 20 copies of my book. And I think I've talked about this in other episodes too, but, and then I'll have a QR code that they can, if I run out, they can scan the QR code and just buy it off of Amazon. And so again, it's right there. So I still get that sale. They don't walk away because if they walk away, they're going to forget. But, it's just one more way to sell books. And the best part is when you sell them in person, you get a much higher cut of it because when you buy it, you're buying it at the author copy. So
Yeah.
for my children's book, Mimi's Adventure, it's $4.20 to print it, but it sells for like $12.99 for the paperback. So if I, get 10 of them at $4, but then I'm now able to sell each of those for $12.99. Or I can just, it says $12.99 on it. I could sell it for an even $10 and I'm still making a good profit.
Yeah.
And, they'll more likely to buy it then because I'm giving it to you cheaper than you'll get it on Amazon. So
Yeah. And
it's,
it's not just
again, it's
that.
just, I'll say it's just getting it out there.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's not just selling it, it's like getting people to know you, to
Hmm.
recognize you, and to put the word out there that you exist. And
Right.
I think that is, it's if you compare it to people going on Amazon and looking through books, it's very impersonal. Whereas with in-person selling, they can see who the author is, they can ask
Right.
you questions, you can interact with the buyers, and I think that's such a good way of doing things. I mean, it might not be the numbers that you get on Amazon,
Hmm.
but it's definitely, I think there's more possibilities of getting repeat buyers that way
Right.
because they get to know you and they recognize you, and that's what builds trust with people as well, and that's so important when you're selling. So yeah, I think that's a really good strategy to follow, in-person selling. Yeah.
I agree. And I've also noticed with the ones that I sell in person, I and I really haven't done too much, specific, ROI on it, but I tend to get more reviews for those books because again, they feel that connection, because they've
Yeah.
seen the whites of your eyes and whatever. The downside is because they bought in person, they don't look as verified reviews. But I always ask them to just, put in there, got this at at whatever it was, a book signing, or I got this at a craft fair or whatever, just so that way when Amazon sees that review, they don't throw it out. They see that, okay,
Yeah.
this is how they got it. And, but yeah, I mean, it just, and having reviews that say that, other people can read that and be like, oh, wow, this author actually goes out in public and sells them, in person. And so, that can obviously, make you look better as a creator as well.
Absolutely. And it's like book signings and things like that, you know, because they kind of have that one-on-one feeling that people
Right.
get, you know, and they've got your signature in the book, which makes it a bit more special for them as well. So, I mean, I do that with my books now. I sign them and give them to people. I gave one to my hairdresser the other day. So, I think it just helps because the word gets out there, and they talk about it to their friends because they've actually met the author rather than just buying a
Right.
book off Amazon, which is a little bit
Exactly.
more impersonal. But yeah, I think it helps in person selling. I think it just puts a face to the author name, and people are more likely to remember you when they see you in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say another strategy that I do for most of my pen names is sharing the journey of creating the book while you're creating the book. You know, as soon as I have an idea for a new book, I will message, you know, I'll put it on social media or whatever. You know, just came up with a great idea for a new book, and you know, maybe give a little bit of a blurb on what it's going to be, and then as you progress, you're sharing journey. I use the analogy of a new mom, you know, who just found out that they were pregnant, and so they're going to share on social media the great news that they just found out that they're pregnant, and then they'll send updates, you know, pictures, whatever, as she goes through the pregnancy, and so and then of course when the baby's born, they make a big deal about it that too. These are your book babies. You should do the exact same thing, because
Yeah.
at first you might be thinking nobody cares. At first, people are like, okay. But if you start sending, you know, updates, they start feeling a vested interest
Yeah.
in what you're creating. And, you know, it's not, to me, the best part is you're not selling at that point. You know, you're just sharing. And then when you say, you know, that the book is now live, again, you're not selling it. These people have been following you through however long it took you to create it. And so they want to see what it turned out to be. They want to see what the cover looks like. They want to, you know, check it out. And so without being salesy, you're literally just sharing with your social media.
Mm.
And it's just, and I think we covered this in a previous episode because I use the analogy about taking pictures of your food. You
Yeah.
know, what you ate for dinner. So yeah, so definitely sharing your journey as you're going definitely is a great strategy to not just get more sales, but to get, you know, more followers. Just to have people feel like they're part of the journey with you.
Absolutely. And I remember talking about this with you, I think, in the last episode, and
Yeah, I think
I
so.
made a note of it because I really need to do that more often. And it's nice because not only do people get involved in the whole process, but it's also nice for us as the authors because you get a lot of encouragement from
Right,
people as well. You do get some haters. That's you can't really avoid
right.
that. But
Agreed.
even you learn from all of it because even the ones that don't leave very good comments, you can still see if they've got a valid point, and if they
Hmm.
don't, you just ignore them. But if they do, it's something you can learn from. And just to have that encouragement from people is really nice as well. From all the people that say, "Oh, I can't wait to," if someone says to you,
Right,
"I can't wait to hear more," that's amazing because then
right.
that means, you know, they mean that. They can't wait to hear more. And that's lovely for us as writers to hear. So,
Yeah,
yeah, it's a good idea to do that. Yeah.
yeah, and especially since, you know, like I said, a lot of writers are introverted, and a lot of times there might, you know, you're writing a book or you're creating a book, whether it's low content, no content, and you know, you're going through struggles or whatever, and there's really nobody in your immediate, uh, you know, village or whatever you want to call it, in your immediate family, that you can share this information with. You know,
Yeah.
they don't understand it. You know, perfect example is my wife. She's super supportive. She listens to everything I talk about, whether it's about books or it's about YouTube. She listens to it, but at the end of the day, it doesn't. She doesn't really care. Not to sound bad, but
I know
she
what you're
doesn't. You
saying.
know, she doesn't understand it, and
Yeah.
so sharing your journey is allowing you that outlet to share with people.
Yeah.
And again, most of them may not understand this business, but
Yeah.
you're sharing it with them. They don't need to understand how to upload a book to KDP to understand that you're writing a book or that you're creating a puzzle book. Wow, I didn't know you could create a puzzle book. So like I said, just again, you're not being salesy, because that's a big fear that people have, is I don't want to seem like I'm being super salesy. But sharing your journey of, how you came up with the idea of it. I just finished chapter 3, done with the first draft, whatever. And again, sharing it along the way will give you like you said, positive comments will give you encouragement. But either way, just having an outlet to share it with can definitely help you.
It's a bit like journaling, really.
Yeah,
You
really.
get the benefits from that as well, because you are kind of putting your thoughts onto paper, and you're kind of sharing a very personal thing with people. And what you said makes perfect sense. I mean, when you tell your family or your friends about what you're doing, especially if you're just starting your journey as an
Right.
author or as a book creator, not everyone will understand. And a lot of people will even discourage you as well. They'll say, oh, get a proper job, or
Right. Yep.
do something more. That's not going to make any money. Don't. So there's a lot of negativity. They don't mean to be negative. They're trying to be helpful,
Right.
but it kind of ends up being negative in a way. And you need to get a wider audience so that you get the positives as well, so you get some encouragement as well, because your family isn't necessarily or your friends and family aren't necessarily the audience that understands what you're doing. So yeah,
Right.
that's an important thing as well,
Right.
to share your journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And similarly, since we were talking about friends and family, and again, I think we covered this in the last episode too. A good KDP strategy, or just self-publishing strategy, is to not have your friends and family buy your book. It
Yes.
it confuses unless they're your target audience, it confuses the algorithm, and the algorithm is trying to find out what your mom has in common with your other, her purchase habits with everybody else that this book is for. And if it's not really for her, they don't know. Like, it's the algorithm's like, they have nothing in common except for the fact that they just bought this book. And so you can a great strategy is kind of twofold. One is, don't have your friends and family buy your book unless they're the target audience, but also have them share the link to the book to people that they know that might be in your target audience. So they're able to help in the fact that they might not be buying the book, but they're still spreading the word. They're still helping you without messing up the Amazon algorithm, without
That's
confusing it.
it.
So,
Yeah, that's a really good point. And also, because it's not a good idea if friends and family buy your book, they're probably not even allowed to leave a review, because Amazon connects
right,
who your buyers are, and if they're in any way connected to you. And people say to me sometimes, oh, they wouldn't know that we're connected. Oh, yes, they do. They know exactly. I don't know how they do it exactly, but I mean, you only have to know that when you talk about a subject, the next minute you're getting adverts for
right,
the topic that you were talking about.
right,
It's all connected, and that doesn't help, because they wouldn't be able to leave reviews. Like you said, it confuses the algorithm. It just, it's best to promote it on your social media, and then the right audience will react to that. So that's the best way to do it, rather than getting family to buy your book when they're not
right.
interested, really. Yeah,
Right, right. And like I said, they want to help you, which is great. And
exactly.
just
Yeah,
say, if you want to help me, the way you can help me is share this
yeah,
with somebody that you think is that likes these types of books.
yeah,
You know, like
absolutely.
if it's romance, my mother's not going to be interested in a romance book, but
Yeah,
her sister might. And so
yeah,
she would share the link with her sister. And
yeah,
so, things like that. So there's definitely a lot of things that you can do to better your chances of getting sales, and you know and getting not just any sales, but the sales that you think your book deserves. But like I said, you need to make sure that you're in a good in a niche that wants books in that niche. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And then all the other things that we discussed are both the do's and the don'ts.
yeah,
So it increases your chance of getting good quality sales. And then, of course, we would be remiss if we didn't at least, mention the fact of running ads. That's, it's a good strategy. But I would say when you run ads, I can't think of a time when you wouldn't want to do this. Use the custom text, the custom sales copy rather than standard, because standard is what it defaults to, which means that there's not going to be any copy on it. And it's just going to be your book cover, your price, and how many stars there is. That's it. So always want to put in a custom text. And what I typically will do is because I've already researched my industry, I've already researched my niche, and I see what the negative reviews are on the other books. And again, I've talked about this before, but if I see a consistent negative thing that people are talking about, I will use that as a selling point for my book on my ads.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And you're right. I mean, running ads is another strategy, and so would be promoting on social media and all those other things to get your book out there into the world. So there's quite a few strategies that we've mentioned that are kind of obvious, but they are not, if you know what I mean. Sometimes we forget to do certain things. Sometimes if you're just starting, some of these things you might not have come across them, or you might not have thought about it. So, but there's definitely strategies that work. And I mean, thinking about everything we've mentioned, I really like the first one we mentioned about making more books.
Yeah.
I think that is probably my number one. I think everybody will have a different one, but that's my number one, I think. So
I would say that the top two for me would definitely be, start working on your next one. But then also, and it might just be because I said it, but is the sharing the journey. Because especially what happens is a lot of times if you're writing a children's book, people are really going to be interested. If you're writing a long, novel, people are going to be interested because they're like, wow, you wrote 75,000 word young adult novel. Wow. But you'll be surprised if you're creating puzzle books and you share that. How many people are like, I didn't know you could create a puzzle book, or, a coloring book. You created a coloring book. I didn't know you could create a coloring book. So don't underestimate or don't overestimate how much other people know about your industry, about creating books. Most people don't. Most people don't know, we're engrossed in it. So it's hard to fathom that someone doesn't know what KDP is. It's hard to believe that, that people don't know that you can create a puzzle book, you can create a line journal, but most of the population don't know that. And so when you share that, I would be surprised if you didn't at least get one person saying, I didn't know you could do that. So it's, there's so many different, and like I said at the beginning, there's no one size fits all. It's, your industry is, your niche is going to be specific to you, and so is your business model, what you feel comfortable doing and what you don't. But I will say, I suggest, especially if you want to get more sales, you're going to have to step out of that comfort zone in one way, shape, or form. And so that's something that you have to just keep in mind. And again, don't limit yourself to what you can do just based on what you've seen other people do. I've actually seen, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but about 2 years ago, there was a guy in the next town over who was standing at a corner and he had a sign, and I just assumed he was asking for money. And so I was going to give him some, and he was actually selling his book. And so again, I've never seen anybody do that. I've seen people sell Girl Scout cookies. I've seen them sell popcorn for Cub Scouts. I've never seen someone standing on a corner selling their book, but that's what he did, And again, so we just gave some, just tip of the iceberg ideas on what to do to help your book sell more. And I definitely think, I know you said the number one for you was creating more books. I would say your number two, I'm going to guess, is probably A+ content, because it's definitely something that, like I said, it's no longer a good to have. I really think, regardless of what kind of content you're creating, I think it's a must have. If you have access to A+ content, then you really need to put A+ content in your book or on your sales page.
Absolutely. I think for me, it's just that thing about I see this as a business, and when you see
Hmm.
things as a business, you see different things as part of the business. And A plus content to me is the display. You know, if you have a
Right.
little shop, I used to have a little shop, so you know you do want to display your products in the best possible light,
Right.
and you know, so A plus content is that part. And yeah, this is why it's so important to see it as a business, because there's so many different things that work together. And I really liked your story here at the end with the man selling his book on the corner. And someone said once, and I can't remember who, but it was, you don't grow when you stay in your comfort zone. And that is
It's
totally
so true.
correct. Yeah, that is so true. So we need to step out of our comfort zone to be able to grow. And I think you and me have done that. And that's why we move forward. And people need to do that more. And I need to do it more as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And when it comes to the A plus content, just one more thing. So many people complain that they have no control over the look inside feature that's on their book. Or maybe, depending on where you publish through, you might even not even have a look inside feature. But while you cannot control how much they show anymore, you used to be able to, but you can't anymore. Um, you can control what they see by using the A plus content. And the
Yeah.
best part is you get to pick and choose everything.
Yeah.
You get to pick and choose. It's not necessarily the first 10%. You don't want to show them the copyright page. You want to show them, the images or whatever. You can do that with A plus content, and you can show someone holding your book by the poolside. And so then the browsing customer sees that and they're like, I can envision myself doing that, or at a coffee shop or whatever. So you have complete control over all of that by creating A plus content. So instead of leaving it in Amazon's hands on how much they're going to show, what they're going to show, you can use the A plus content to bring out all the positives about your book.
Yeah. I think it's a big deal. We never used to have it, and now
No.
we've got it. We need to make use of it.
Well, and also not everybody publishes on KDP.
Yeah.
So, and as far as I know, KDP is the only platform that you can do A plus content with.
Yeah. There
So
was
like
none on
you can't do it
Ingram
with,
Spark.
say none, there's none on Ingram Spark, there's none with
Yeah.
Lulu. Like you have to do it through KDP.
Yeah.
And so because of that, again, it's just another way to make your book stand out compared to all the others. And you don't have to do all 5 modules that they, say is a max. Do 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And there's so many different types of modules that you can put in your A plus content that even someone in the exact same niche as you, their A plus content can look completely different. And so that's definitely something that if you have access to that, I highly recommend. Like, I don't even think it's it's a nice to have. It's a must have for me and the different pen names that I publish under.
It's an essential, I think,
Yeah.
and we've got it, and I'm so happy we do have it, because it just makes the whole thing so much better. Yeah.
Yeah. It does it completes it. Like, I mean, obviously the book cover is what draws people's attention when they're scrolling, but once they get in there, that A plus content is what keeps them engaged with, visually.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, this has been another great Mastermind, Nuria. Once again, a huge thank you to all our listeners and viewers who came to tag along. If you enjoyed today's Mastermind, please consider following or subscribing to the podcast, and maybe leave us a review and let us know what you thought. Until next time, I'm Keith Wheeler.
And I'm Nuria Corby.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining the Mastermind today. Be sure to follow the podcast on your platform of choice and tell a friend who would enjoy it too. Your support is greatly appreciated. This has been the Masterminding Success Podcast.